Hey everybody, it's Jess and welcome to LARP 101 Building Character Background. In my experience, I find that character backgrounds can be vastly overcomplicated. Everyone wants to tell a great story and they make a character background that they've laid out very carefully from start to finish, which actually doesn't leave a lot of room most of the time for character growth, because they know how exactly everything started, they have this amazing story in the middle, and then the stories come to an end, and then you actually start the LARP, and it's like what you're playing in the LARP is the sequel to the character you built. And in my experience, sequels are never ever good as the original story. So what I wanted to do with this video is I wanted to give a demonstration of a method I use for character building, which gives you a skeleton of a story that you can add a little bit of fluff to, and then still leaves a large amount of room for character growth, which will allow you to build on your character and enjoy your character as you go without feeling bogged down in the fine details. So what I would like to do is show you the construction of a character that I have been making from start to finish. This character is entirely based on this crown that I bought from my wonderful shop on Etsy. It's called My Shiny Box. And I found it while perusing for LARP Kit one day. I had a full-on Gollum moment in my living room of my precious, and decided to buy it without even really thinking. And I realised that I didn't really have a character who would wear this kind of thing. So I had to start coming up with one in my head, otherwise, you know, I've just wasted a lot of money on what can only be described as the most beautiful crown I have actually ever owned. So this character I've built is for the Lorien Trust. It is my main system that I play. I would be looking to play this character possibly when I stop being staff. And I decided that I actually want to play the game again. However, I wanted to make her in a way that I could translate her over to other LARPs in case I changed my mind later. So bear in mind that a lot of the character background details that I'm going to give are specific to the Lorien Trust system, but are alterable quite easily. I've also decided that I'm going to write her to play in a faction in the Lorien Trust called the Hearts. Now, the Hearts are based on Arthurian mythology. The story of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table ties tightly into that. It is an aspect of mythology that is so close to my heart and sounds so fun, and I want to play with that. So I have based my character's story on Arthurian mythology. So I construct my characters with what I call a 5-3-2-1 method, which is 5 key events, 3 character traits, 2 flaws, and 1 secret. These, because it's such a compact construction, it allows me to remember my character details quite easily, but I can pad it out enough with sort of fluff and details to make it interesting for other people to listen to. Because one thing I know that comes up in LARP quite often, from my experience, is how little people want to listen to your character background. So this will make a nice, concise little background that opens me up to a lot of story and allows me to create characters that I think are interesting and fun at the same time. So the 5-3-2-1 method is just something that I use. I don't necessarily think it's right for everybody, but I struggle with complex backgrounds and I feel like it's something that works for me. So if you're like me and struggle with building characters that have depth and have flavour, this could work for you. It might not, but it is something that I feel is quite a helpful, simple way to do things. So this character that I've built, I've decided I want to play an elf. I haven't played an elf in a while. I've only done one before, in fact, and that was for a Dragon Age LARP over the last winter. But I want to do something a little bit more different with it, because obviously elves in Dragon Age have their whole backstory that's very different from traditional elves. I've decided I want to play a knight because I love combat. It is my favourite aspect of LARP. I love to go and get into a good fight. But I also decided that I want to play a bit with magic because I haven't done that before. Whenever I start building a character, I always go and construct a Pinterest board and I look at the general aesthetic I want my character to have. So 3 parts of the aesthetic that I quite liked. There's Zelda from the Hyrule Warriors game with her armour and her sword. I thought that was quite beautiful artwork to see, and I wanted to sort of incorporate that. Another one was She-Ra from the new She-Ra and the Princess of Power series on Netflix, which is currently a big addiction of mine. And most importantly, I wanted to base her off Morgana from BBC's Merlin, because she was an amazingly well-written character. She had a lot of depth to her. She was a fighter and she was a witch, and it was an amazing blend of swords and magic, and that is definitely what I want to bring forward in this character. So my 5, 3, 2, 1 method. So the first one is the 5 key life events. And these are 5 points in a character's history that define your character and who they are and why they behave the way they are. It's essentially the skeleton. So you have these 5 points in someone's life where you go, this is what makes my character their character. The reason why I personally stick to 5 key events is because it's easy to remember. If you start writing a really long, detailed character background, I'm sure it will be absolutely beautiful, and that is completely your choice. And if you want to go and have 7 key events or whatever, that's absolutely fine. But my memory is shockingly poor, and in a LARP field with a lot of different things going on, I find that I can forget certain details. So by narrowing it down to these 5 key points, it's enough for me to have anecdotes to share with other characters and form relationships, but not so detailed that I lose track and become inconsistent with my story, because at the end of the day, I believe consistency is one of the things that adds realism to LARP. So her first key life event, I've decided I want this character to be born into a wealthy family, which consists entirely of her and her mother. They are landed, they have a nice castle and a bit of land to their name, but they don't actually have a title themselves, because if I try and give them a title, that can kind of interfere with the plot of the Lorien Trust, and that's not something that people tend to approve of. They want you to sort of integrate in, as opposed to just standing in there and go, well, I'm the Duchess of so-and-so. So I've decided not to give her a title, but I want her to have some money, because I think that will add some key interesting points for the character. So number 2, I decided I want her to have learned magic from her mother. I'm basing the concept of her mother off the character of Shaira Seastar from George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. If you don't know who the character is, go look her up, because she is absolutely fascinating. I have a wonderful piece of art here, as you can see. Just to give you sort of an idea, she's a lone character who is considered to be very beautiful and very magical. People are enamoured with her and at the same time terrified of her, and I think that would be sort of a great concept to have as a mother figure in my character's life. So the third key event I've decided is that her mother's going to die, and my character is deciding that she wants to be a knight after reading some books about the Knights of the Round Table. Because she loves to read. She grew up in this little house with a massive library, and there's no reason why that wouldn't be a resource to her, and that will lead into her how she has both magic as well as being a knight. So the fourth key event I've decided is that as she wants to be a knight, she'll have had to have squired underneath somebody in order to learn her trade. So I decided that she would squire under a friend of her mother's who is also quite wealthy, because I find that would be much more interesting to have. I don't want her to have ever had to like sleep in a barn or anything like that, for character reasons that I will tie into in a minute. And the fifth key point is that this knight is going to have to die, because Otherwise I'm going to have to explain why she's not with him anymore. So I've decided that he's going to die slaying some great beast. And to add to my character's get-up, she's going to get a scar on her face from that fight. Because I always think that if someone's going to be able to look at your character, they should be able to tell parts of their story quite quickly. So the next part of character construction is to give your character 3 character traits. So the traits are the building blocks on top of your backstory, and they are how your character acts and are the basis of their personality. And your backstory should explain partially why your character has these traits. So it all knits together quite nicely. So the character traits I've decided for this character is that she's going to be a bookworm, because I personally love to read. I have a mountain of books at home, and I feel like that's something that she would have a resource to have as well. She would have read about the Knights of the Round Table. That's what would have inspired her to be a knight. So I feel like she would have had a massive library which she would have been able to have poured through as a child, and therefore that would be a strong aspect of her personality. I've also decided that she's going to be quite brave, because that is a classic trait for knights to have, and therefore I want to pull that in as well. And I've also decided that she's going to be quite cunning, and this ties into the character of her mother and how her mother will have taught her to look at the world. And this will be her primary way of interacting with the world, in that she's going to hopefully be quite sly and quite clever. That being said, one thing I always need to keep in mind is the limitations of the first rep. I don't naturally see myself as a sly and clever person, but it is something I would like to try and pull off. This is something to keep in mind when you're writing your character, is that if you don't feel comfortable with certain character trait, you shouldn't really try and force yourself into them unless you're really trying to get out of your comfort zone. There is no point in making yourself feel uncomfortable for the sake of a character if you don't feel like you're going to enjoy it. And that being said as well, this ties into my 2 flaws that I believe characters should have. Flaws are something that I've actually had a lot of debates over with other people at LARP. Some people believe that they don't want to write character flaws at all for their characters, preferring to rely on the flaws they already have as a human being. Other people want to write in specific flaws because they want to try and understand their characters from a point of view that may not necessarily be their own. I always believe that characters should have flaws written into them. I think it adds depth. I think it is a way of sort of going, I don't think this character is, you know, a godlike being. They have a sense of groundedness and a sense of mortality to them, just simply because they are not this perfect creature. So the 2 flaws I've decided I want this character to have is I've decided that she's probably going to be quite a spoiled young lady. She will have been raised in a wealthy household. She would have been taught by a wealthy knight. Like I said previously, the odds of her sleeping on a stable floor is next to nil. So I would like her to play her as a character who is not necessarily like entitled, but would be very confused if she was ever to experience real hardship. So if someone was to talk to her about not having enough food for the winter, she would never be able to relate to that. She's always had food. And while that may make her a bit insensitive, I feel that that is a place for her to have some character growth. The second issue I've decided that she's going to have is I think she should have some form of abandonment issues. I have no father written into her story at all, which will not play a massive aspect of her life. But considering the fact that her mother and her mentor are going to die over the course of her backstory, I felt that as a result of that, she would find herself alone very quickly. And while she would naturally be a sociable person, she would be very acutely aware that people she relies on and cares for do disappear. And that will be an issue that she will sort of take into herself going forward. In terms of my last and most important thing, which is that all characters should have one secret. I'm not actually going to tell you what this character's secret is because I do intend to play this character. And the whole point of the secret is that it can be one of a few things. It could be a major plot point that you want to explore with the plot writers and you want them to bring that into your own personal story. Or it could just be something rather simple and rather innocuous, but it should be something that's deeply ingrained in your character, because at the end of the day, no one should know your character more than you, and you should have a right to keep something private, because we all do. We all have this innate thing where we don't necessarily open up every aspect of our lives to the people around us, even people who we're extremely close to. So it could be something as dramatic as, you know, the son of the evil lord who once ruled over the kingdom and wants to destroy everything. Or it could be as simple as they've slept with a teddy bear they've had since they were 6, called Oscar. It doesn't really matter if it's one way or the other, but I feel like characters should have that slight sense of mystery to them, just to add a sense of depth or flavour. Okay, and that's pretty much it, my method for building a character background. I have no name for this character, so if you have a name that you think would be absolutely perfect for her, please suggest it in the comments below. I would be very grateful. As I said, this is a King Arthur based character, so if you can think of something that would be appropriate, definitely recommend it for me. Please subscribe, because I've got more stuff coming out. Also follow me on Instagram and Twitter, because I like to post on there a lot as well. And I'll see you soon. Bye!